How do I want to start this? Hi, welcome to Heat Check. It's Heat Check. Get ready to get hot. Welcome to Heat Check. My name is Derek Parker. I write about the NBA at a couple of different places, primarily the Thunder and the NBA Draft. And I'm on day 4 or 5 of a quarantine right now, and I'm going absolutely insane, so I've decided to start a new project called Heat Check. Here's how Heat Check works. I'm going to identify one NBA draft prospect and grade what I believe to be their 5 most generally important skills: scoring, defense, passing and playmaking, athleticism, and overall feel. Since no two prospects are alike, I'll grade a few additional areas specific to that player deemed the swing skills. Each skill will be graded on the Heat Check chart with ranges from cold all the way to scorching. When that's all said and done, I'll divvy out one final score that will have absolutely no bearing or real-world effect on said player whatsoever. Without further ado, as you can probably tell from the thumbnail and title of this video, the first one is on Brandon Miller. Miller is a 6'9" wing out of Alabama. He is a lengthy sharpshooter averaging 20.1 points, 8.3 rebounds, and 1.8 assists per game on pretty good shooting splits. One thing to note is that he'll be well into 20 on draft night, so he's a really old freshman. I personally won't be docking him any points for that. You are what you are, but that might move the needle for some. Let's start out with athleticism, since it's generally one of the easier things to break down. I'm feeling warm about Miller's athleticism. By most standards, Brandon Miller will probably be an average NBA athlete, but combined with his size and fluidity, you couldn't really ask for much more. He leverages it well, typically rebounding the ball, but he has flashed it in a variety of ways offensively as well. And now for the good part, his scoring. Averaging more points than any freshman in the country, I think it's safe to say Miller has earned a hot scoring grade. He's shooting 47% from the floor and 46% from 3 on a whopping 7 attempts. Suffice to say, the dude can see the ball through the hoop. Right now, Miller is at his best as a spot-up three-point shooter. He's shooting 70% on unguarded spot-up shots. 70%, or the 100th percentile in college basketball right now. If he's getting an open look, it's probably going through the hoop. Outside shooting is where he'll make his money, but Miller can score in a variety of ways. He's a lengthy, fluid athlete and a good transition threat. His finishing around the rim needs to improve. We'll get to that later, but he's certainly not inept and can find plenty of ways to score inside too. Another thing we'll get to later, Miller does just fine in the PNR, a great skill to have for any scorer. There's certainly things to improve on. Miller can't yet break people down with his handle, if ever, and he needs to get quite a bit stronger in order to really tap into his frame, but otherwise, he's a threat to score almost anywhere. Defensively, I personally am feeling a little cooler on Brandon Miller. Before you overreact, he's not bad by any means. Simply by the nature of being a lengthy 6'9" forward in college, he makes plays and puts himself in good position pretty often. But similar to prospects of drafts past, when I actually throw on the tape, I think there's a lot to be desired. Again, he's got all the tools to be just fine in the NBA, and for any team drafting him, that's likely all they'll need. But I think dreams of him being some stalwart or 6'9" all-world defender are just that, dreams. That being said, he's good. He's fairly switchable, and when his motor's going, he can really wreak havoc on ball.
Miller, Reeves, no chance.
The cool ranking here is more in comparison to other prospects who just have much higher floors or ceilings on the defensive end of the court than Miller. You're drafting him for his offense. I'm feeling warm on Miller's passing. Coming into his year at Alabama, it was one of the main things I was looking forward to seeing, and it's something that I think is really carried over from his high school tape. It's hard to showcase at times in Alabama's offense, but Miller has shown the ability to make some pretty adept reads. I certainly wouldn't call him a playmaker yet, but he's got a really strong foundation to build on. In the absolute least, he's comfortable with the ball in his hands. He loves looking ahead in transition, which I personally enjoy, and as stated earlier, has shown some real promise in the pick and roll. His handle is good enough for him to maneuver around, and he's tall enough to get the ball in places others just can't when he's passing. Again, I wouldn't call him elite just yet, but there's certainly much more there than your average 6'9" shooter. Overall feel for the game isn't really quantifiable via stats, but it's something that I think is super important to the scouting process of these guys, especially in the case of Brandon Miller. When you're selecting in the upper ranks of the NBA draft, and more specifically looking for a star basketball player, feel for the game is something monumentally important to me. Both tall freshman shooters in back-to-back drafts, Miller and Houston's Jabari Smith Jr. have drawn some comparisons, and their game is similar at times, but their differences I think are separated by overall feel for the game of basketball, and my main point is that Miller has it. He's more fluid with the ball in his hands, makes easier and cleaner decisions, has that innate, almost clairvoyant feel when something's about to happen, and no knock on Bari, but he just didn't and just doesn't have those things. Like I said, it's not quantifiable outside of just watching him go to work, but it's a ceiling raiser for me for sure. And now for the swing skills, and let's start with driving and finishing. We just talked about similarities to Jabari Smith Jr., and this is a big one for everybody because Bari hasn't gotten off to the hottest start in the NBA due to it. I'm feeling cool on both opposed to cold, and I was even tempted to lean a little more towards warm, and I'll explain why. Let's start with driving. Due to a lack of elite speed, burst, and elite handle, Miller has some trouble generating consistent paint touches. He's simply not the type of athlete that has blow-by skills, and sometimes it shows. I'm not massively worried about it, honestly, due to the way more cerebral style players have been able to dominate the NBA of late, but it's certainly something to monitor. Finishing is the big one. It was bad to start. In his first 9 games, he shot around 40% at the rim, which is pretty dreadful. But even then, though the numbers looked bad, the tape felt like they were destined to see a jump, and boy, they did. In the next 9, he finished around 70% at the rim, and he's now leveled around the high 50s on the season. Pretty respectable number. There's been a ton of discourse around it on NBA Draft Twitter and wherever else, and to be honest, I think it's all a little overblown. Like I said earlier, Miller simply has more feel and natural skill with the ball in his hands than those that have struggled to get started in the NBA, and I'm just not that worried about it. That said, it does need to keep improving, and I think he gets a little too fanciful around the rim a little too often. I'm much more worried about his ability to consistently generate paint touches than I am finishing the ball when he actually gets there. Lastly and quickly is his decision making and shot quality. I'm feeling cool on it. He's shown the capability to make tough reads and passes, but he's far from a perfect decision maker. I think his ability to make the right play and do it quickly is one of, if not the main thing that's either going to propel him into stardom or a spot-up shooting role. Shot quality is another big one. He grades pretty poorly in low shot quality. Being able to make contested buckets is great, but learning when to shoot and how to shoot is vastly more important, and I do think Miller has a ways to go in that department. Alright, moment of truth. If you hadn't guessed from the contents of this video, I think there's a whole lot of good that comes with Brandon Miller, and I think that lots of flaws floating around out there are really nitpicky. Of course, he has them. He's not a perfect prospect by any means, but dominating college basketball like he is as a freshman, no matter the age, earns you points in my personal book. I grade him an 8.8 out of 10. I haven't totally figured out how I'm going to describe my rating system yet, but just know that I'd be perfectly fine taking Miller as high as number 3. I think his overall range will be anywhere from 3 to 6. For reference, I've been giving grades out to prospects for a little bit now. On my personal 2022 board, I graded Chet Holmgren a 9.2, Paolo Banchero a 9.1, probably too low, and Jabari Smith Jr. and Jaden Ivey both 8.7s. So Miller would be somewhere in between all of those guys. That is it for this video. If you're still here, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Drop a like, drop a follow, do whatever the YouTube people do. If you liked the video, let me know who else you want to see. Let me know how I can make it better. That's all I got.